The kind of night that turns Atlanta upside down doesn't come around often, but when it does, it drags everybody into the chaos, even the people who swear they want nothing to do with it. And tonight's story? Oh baby! This one is the kind that makes fans sit up straight, clutch their phones, and wonder what in the world is going on behind the scenes of these so-called picture-perfect marriages. Because just when folks were still trying to catch their breath over that messy Tamar and Mendices situation that's been circling the blogs, suddenly and very unexpectedly, Kirk Frost's name slid right into the mess like it had been waiting for its cue. And trust me, the internet did not take that lightly. Overnight, new chatter started bouncing around everywhere, claiming that Kirk wasn't just a witness to the Tamar chaos, but that he somehow ended up wrapped in it. And that alone was enough to shake Rasheeda in a way fans haven't seen in years. It all started with bloggers hinting that Kirk may have been present the same night Tamar situation blew up. The same night all those questions rose about who was with her, who wasn't, and who might have known a little more than they said. Nobody stated anything as fact, but the whispers were loud enough that people began piecing together their own theories. And then, out of nowhere, one thing after another pushed Rasheeda right to her breaking point. Fans say she looked tense in her latest appearance. Others claim she was avoiding questions. Some even swear they saw her giving Kirk that look. No, the look the one wives give when they already know something. Isn't adding up, and when the online chatter started saying Kirk might have had a front row view to the Tamar and Mendices tension. Oh, Rasheeda had enough. Because if there's anything she's tired of, it's being blindsided. So according to reports floating around, Rasheeda didn't wait, didn't breathe, didn't let things simmer. She went straight to Kirk, demanding to know why his name was being attached to a scandal that had absolutely nothing to do with him. Or so she thought. Fans are calling it Atlanta's most unexpected confrontation, one that nobody saw coming, least of all Kirk himself. And what happened when Rasheeda finally cornered him? Well, that's where the real drama begins. The moment everything tipped over started quietly, almost too quietly, like the calm before a storm that everyone feels in their chest but pretends isn't real. Atlanta had already been buzzing with the mess swirling around Tamar and the stories attached to that confusing night. People were arguing online, trying to fill in the missing pieces, dragging names into the mix, and questioning every detail. Nobody knew what was real, what was exaggerated, or what was being twisted into something bigger than it actually was. But the second Kirk's name slipped into those whispers, something inside Rasheeda shifted. And even though she didn't want to react publicly, the pressure inside her home behind the pretty pictures, behind the curated moments, was building like a slow-burning fire. Rasheeda had been trying to stay calm, because she didn't want to look like one of those wives who panic the moment the streets start talking. But this time, it hit different. This wasn't Kirk being caught up in one of his usual careless decisions. This wasn't some old rumor coming back to haunt them. This was something else entirely. This was him being tide-weathered by accident or through pure Atlanta gossip energy to a situation that was already messy enough without their marriage being dragged back into the mud. So naturally, her first reaction wasn't anger. It was confusion. Confusion mixed with fear, mixed with annoyance, mixed with that old ache she thought she had buried for good, because when the internet starts connecting dots, even dots that shouldn't be connected, Rasheeda knows what happens next. She's lived through it before. She knows how fast people jump to conclusions. She knows how fast those conclusions turn into headlines. Headlines turn into jokes. Jokes turn into narratives. And narratives, well, those are the hardest things to fight. And once Kirk's name started floating around that Tamar incident, fans didn't waste time. They started dragging up every old betrayal, every lie, every tearful conversation, every time she told people they had moved on. And that alone was enough to make her chest tighten, so she confronted him. She didn't wait. The moment Kirk walked through the door after running errands, she was already sitting there, hands pressed together, eyes fixed on him in a way that made him stop mid-step. He tried to smile, tried to make a joke, tried to ease the tension, But Rasheeda wasn't giving him even a second of space. She said his name in that calm, terrifying tone wives use when they already know something's off. And he froze. She asked him straight up why people online were saying he was present at that event the same night Tamar's situation happened. She didn't shout. She didn't accuse. She didn't raise her voice. She just stared at him like she was trying to read every tiny change in his facial expression. Kirk blinked, confused, trying to piece together what she was even talking about. Because the rumor had spread while he was out. He had no idea the blogs had included his name. His confusion only made her more irritated because she thought he was pretending not to know what she meant. So her voice cracked just slightly when she asked again. Kirk stepped closer, saying he didn't know anything about it. He kept repeating that he wasn't even near Tamar that night. Think that he wasn't involved, that somebody must have twisted something up? But Rasheeda wasn't fully convinced. Not because she believed he had anything to do with Tamar personally. Not because she thought he was hiding some big involvement, but because every time Kirk said, "I don't know," it reminded her of all the times he said those same words in the past, right before the truth exploded in her face. She hated that her mind even went there, but that's what happens when you've been hurt before. The past doesn't stay quiet. Kirk started getting defensive, which only made things worse. He asked her why she was getting worked up over online chatter. He said she was letting people push her buttons again. He said they promised they wouldn't let the internet control their home anymore. And instead of calming her down, his words made her angrier. She told him it wasn't about the rumor itself. It was about the fact that his name showing up in another mess, no matter how innocent it might be, made her look foolish again. She said she was tired of being the woman people picture when they think of a wife holding her family together after a husband keeps slipping up, and something about the way she said it hit Kirk hard. He softened immediately. His shoulders dropped. The irritation left his face. He sat down next to her and finally listened. Really listened, not just reacted. She told him that the reason she was upset wasn't because she believed he was with Tamar or doing something sneaky. It was because she didn't understand why his name was even close to something that dramatic. She told him she had worked too hard to rebuild herself, rebuild her trust, rebuild her reputation, rebuild her peace. And she wasn't willing to let anything intentional or not shake that foundation again. Kirk sighed and started explaining everything from the start. He told her where he was that night. He told her who he was with. He told her what he had heard afterward. And the more he talked, the more Rasheeda began to relax. Not because his explanations were perfect, but because his tone was steady. She watched him carefully, trying to see if any part of him was flinching or hesitating. But he wasn't. He looked tired, frustrated even, but honest as he spoke. Rasheeda's mind slowly peeled back from the edge. She knew Kirk sometimes got pulled into situations without meaning to. She knew how Atlanta nightlife worked, how everyone knew someone, how names got mixed into stories simply because of proximity. And somewhere deep inside, she also knew that if Kirk had actually been part of something that serious, his behavior would have been way different. His panic would have been visible. His energy would have been jumpy. His guilt would have shown. But he was steady. Still. Something inside her wasn't fully settled. Something still felt unfinished, like the pieces weren't fitting right. Kirk kept talking, and she listened. But a tiny part of her kept circling back to one thought. Why did the blogs pull his name into this at all? There wasn't at least some tiny thread connecting things in a way she didn't fully see yet. And that quiet uncertainty sat in her chest, heavy and uncomfortable. Even as Kirk tried to reassure her, she leaned back, took a breath, and tried to gather her thoughts, trying to understand what she was still missing. Because something about the story felt bigger, wider, deeper than what Kirk was saying. Like someone else might have contributed to the confusion without him knowing. And as she looked at him, trying to figure out what exactly she wasn't catching, a knock suddenly came from the hallway. And both of them turned their heads at the exact same time as a familiar voice called out quietly. The voice drifting down the hallway made both of them straight. Rumor snowballed. Rasheeda swallowed hard, bracing herself. and Kirk felt the weight of her eyes slide toward him again. He lifted his hand slightly, asking what the messages actually said. Carly explained that someone had mentioned seeing Kirk in the same building earlier that night. Not in the chaos, not near Tamar, but in the general space. Enough for people to start piecing things together however they wanted. Kirk frowned, shaking his head, repeating that he wasn't anywhere near the section Tamar and Mendices were in. But Carly added that sometimes all it took was one person posting something vague online for the story to blow up into something. Massive.Rasheeda felt a mix of frustration and relief. Frustration because even being in the same building was enough to drag her back into old wounds, old memories, old scars. Relief because at least the rumor didn't suggest he was actually with Tamar. Still, she wasn't fully settled. She asked Carly who sent the messages. Carly hesitated, eyes shifting, and that hesitation alone told Rasheeda the answer wouldn't be simple. She finally admitted that she couldn't reveal the person's name because they didn't want to be dragged into the drama. But they insisted Kirk wasn't doing anything suspicious. They said his presence simply overlapped with the event's timeline. Kirk sighed hard, running a hand over his face, clearly annoyed. He said Atlanta nightlife wasn't small, that people always cross paths, that a coincidence shouldn't be blown into a headline. But Rasheeda reminded him that coincidences were exactly how their marriage had been dragged through the mud before. He looked at her with a mix of apology and exhaustion, trying to show her that this time wasn't like the past, that he wasn't hiding anything. Carlie watched the couple closely before speaking again. She said the reason she came wasn't just because Kirk's name got tangled up. She said there were new whispers that someone intentionally used Kirk's name to distract from another person being involved. Someone who absolutely did not want their own name floating around. Rasheeda's eyes widened. Kirk blinked fast, hands dropping to his sides. Rasheeda asked who would do that. Carly shrugged slightly and said that in this industry, anyone protecting themselves would gladly let someone else take the heat. The thought of Kirk being used as a shield made Rasheeda's stomach twist differently. Hurt shifted into anger, but not toward Kirk this time. She wanted to know who would put her husband's name into a story that didn't belong to him, knowing the damage it could cause. She turned to Carly, demanding more details. Carly said she didn't know the exact name, but the messages implied it was someone close to the circle, someone who had something to lose, someone who assumed the internet would easily latch onto Kirk because of his past reputation. Rasheeda clenched her jaw, and Kirk muttered that he was tired of people turning his mistakes into a free pass for lies. Rasheeda sat down slowly, trying to process everything. She wasn't completely calm, but she was no longer spiraling toward the worst version of the story. She looked at Kirk and said she believed he wasn't involved with Tamar's mess, but she needed to know why someone would willingly drag him in. Kirk didn't have an answer, and that scared her more than anything he could have admitted. Uncertainty felt heavier than guilt. Carly shifted her weight awkwardly, then admitted there was something else she wanted to say. Something she wasn't sure she should bring up, but couldn't ignore. Rasheeda braced herself, and Kirk closed his eyes briefly, as if mentally preparing for the next blow. Carly said there were rumors going around that someone might have seen Kirk speaking to one of Mendice's friends earlier that night before everything went down. Not in a suspicious way, not in a secretive corner, but enough to make people assume he was connected to whatever happened later. Rasheeda's breath hitched. Kirk instantly said he didn't talk to anyone connected to that situation. He insisted Carly's source must be mistaken. Carly repeated that she wasn't saying the rumor was true, only that people were pushing it online. Rasheeda leaned forward, her voice quiet but sharp, asking Kirk if he was absolutely sure. His answer came quickly, firm and steady. He said no. He wasn't anywhere near Mendice's circle that night. Carly watched him closely and eventually nodded, as if she believed him. But before Rasheeda could ask another question, Carly added something else, something softer, almost hesitant. She said that some fans online were also speculating that Tamar's situation might have involved more people than the public realized. And in that chaos, anyone present at the venue became a suspect in the eyes of gossip blogs. That explanation felt more believable, more grounded. It didn't solve the mystery, but it made the rumor feel less intentional. Rasheeda leaned back again, rubbing her forehead. Kirk placed a hand on her shoulder cautiously. She didn't push him away this time. She sighed and whispered that she hated how quickly their peace could be disrupted by someone else's mess. Kirk nodded, saying he understood and that he wished he could shield her from all of it. She looked up at him, eyes still questioning but softer, like she was trying to rebuild trust brick by brick in real time. Then Carly checked her phone suddenly, eyebrows lifting slightly as another notification popped up. She hesitated before saying there was new information surfacing on the blogs right that moment. Information that might change the entire direction of the rumor altogether. Rasheeda looked at her sharply and Kirk leaned in without speaking. Both of them frozen as Carly read silently for a moment, her expression shifting slowly from neutral to something more complicated. Something that made Rasheeda instinctively straighten in her seat, waiting for the next bomb to drop as the tension inside the room thickened all over again. Tarlie stared at her phone a little too long. Long enough for Rasheeda to start feeling that familiar pressure building behind her ribs again. The kind of pressure that comes from waiting on information you know is about to shift the room's energy. Kirk stepped closer without thinking, eyes glued to Carly's expression as she bit her lip, hesitated, and finally let out a slow breath like she was trying to figure out where to even begin. Rasheeda whispered for her to just say it because she couldn't take the suspense. Carly looked up slowly and said that a new post was circulating, claiming that Tamar wasn't the only person seen acting off that night. According to the new chatter, someone from their circle might have been part of a heated argument moments before Tamar's situation escalated. Rasheeda stiffened, eyes narrowing. She asked immediately if Kirk's name was mentioned again. Carly shook her head, saying no, it wasn't directly about him. But the problem was more complicated. The rumor suggested that a man wearing clothes similar to Kirk's outfit from earlier in the day had been spotted near one of the back hallways. Fans were already screenshotting his Instagram story from that day, matching colors, matching outfits, matching lighting. Even though the rumor didn't directly claim Kirk was the guy in the hallway, people were starting to speculate again just off that one visual similarity. Kirk groaned under his breath, rubbing his face as frustration washed over him. He said he was beyond tired of being dragged into situations he had nothing to do with. Rasheeda closed her eyes, struggling not to let the frustration spiral back into suspicion. She reminded herself that outfits weren't evidence. Atlanta was full of people wearing similar clothes every weekend. But she also knew how quickly fans twisted details into entire storylines. She exhaled slowly, trying to hold on to her composure. Carly put her phone down and explained that she wasn't trying to stir anything, but she thought they needed to see how fast the rumor was spreading. People were commenting under old posts, tagging Rasheeda, tagging Kirk, tagging anyone remotely related to the situation. The internet had turned into a storm, and Kirk's name was floating right near the edge of it. He muttered something about people needing to get a hobby, but his voice didn't have the usual humor in it. He looked worn out emotionally and mentally. Like all the old wounds he thought had healed were suddenly being poked at again. Rasheeda, I watched him carefully. She could see his sincerity, the tired honesty behind his eyes. But there was still something inside her that couldn't fully relax. She asked him again if he was sure he wasn't near that hallway. Kirk nodded, saying he left early, stayed near the front, didn't step near any back sections. She listened, trying to believe him, wanting to believe him. But scared of being blindsided again, Carly sat down on the edge of the couch, crossing her legs dramatically as she always did when she knew she had more to say. She said the blogs weren't just talking about Kirk. They were also dragging other people into the mix, including someone unexpected. She paused, letting the suspense hang for a moment before revealing that the new rumor mentioned a man from Tamar's past possibly being around that night. Someone who had a complicated history with her. someone who didn't want their name attached to anything chaotic again. Carly suggested that maybe that person was the reason Kirk's name got pulled in, used as a Rasheeda felt the words settle in her mind. The idea that someone else might have shifted the spotlight intentionally made her chest tighten in a completely different way. That meant Kirk wasn't the target, but the tool. And she hated that possibility even more. Kirk was staring at Carly, trying to follow her logic. Confused, but also slightly relieved. He told her he didn't know anything about someone from Tamar's past being involved. He said he didn't even know Tamar well enough to be anywhere near her drama. Rasheeda whispered that she needed clarity. She needed details. She needed something concrete. Carly told her the only concrete thing was that the rumors were messy, contradictory, constantly evolving, and that the more names being added, the more tangled everything became. Rasheeda took a slow breath, trying to steady herself. She looked at Kirk and told him she needed reassurance. She needed honesty. She needed him to understand why she was triggered, even if he had nothing to do with Tamar's situation. Kirk moved closer, speaking in a calm, steady tone. He told her that he wasn't involved in anything and that he would never put her in a position where she had to defend him over something he didn't do. He told her he understood why she was tense, why her guard went up, why her voice cracked earlier. He said he knew he was the reason those scars still existed, and he didn't blame her for being scared. Rasheeda looked at him for a long moment, eyes softening, but not fully settled. Trust was a delicate thing, and although she believed his words, she still needed something that erased the lingering doubt. Carly's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, frowned, and then her eyes widened slightly. She said a new video clip had surfaced online showing someone walking in the hallway. The clip was blurry, poorly lit, and shot from an odd angle, but fans were already using it as supposed proof. Rasheeda asked if the man in the video looked like Kirk. Carly hesitated. She said the silhouette was similar, but the height didn't match Kirk's exactly. The build looked slightly different too. But that didn't stop people from assuming. Kirk snatched the phone gently, holding it closer, studying the clip. He watched the short moment repeatedly, jaw tightening with each replay. He pointed out the differences immediately. He said the man had broader shoulders, moved differently, wore shoes he didn't own. Rasheeda leaned in, watching closely. After a few seconds, she nodded slowly. She could see it too. It wasn't Kirk. Anyone comparing the clip to his outfit was doing it for drama, not accuracy. For the first time that night, Rasheeda exhaled with a sense of genuine relief. But it lasted only a moment before another thought struck her. If it wasn't Kirk, and if the blogs were mixing him into the story for no reason, then who was really in that hallway? And why was that person so determined to stay hidden? Before she could voice the question, Carly said there was another twist surfacing. Some fans were claiming that a certain influencer who had been at the event was seen leaving the building around the same time everything happened. This influencer was known for stirring things up, known for slipping around backstage areas, known for hovering around drama like a magnet. People were saying that influencer might have been the one arguing with someone before Tamar's situation unfolded. Kirk rolled his eyes, clearly annoyed that the rumor mill was turning random people into suspects now. Rasheeda rubbed her temples, overwhelmed. Carly insisted she wasn't saying any of these rumors were true, only that this was how fast stories mutated online. The worst part was that the more people talked, the more Kirk's name kept being pushed around as a reference point, even if he wasn't meant to be the central focus. Rasheeda stood up and walked to the window, staring out into the night. She said she didn't understand why life had to keep throwing chaos at them when all she wanted was peace. Kirk walked over slowly, careful not to push too hard. He told her they would get through it, that he was willing to prove his innocence however many times she needed. She closed her eyes briefly, letting his words soak in, wanting to believe that everything was as simple as he said. Carly leaned back on the couch, crossing her arms, watching them quietly. She could see both of them fighting separate battles in the same room. She finally spoke, saying that there was something else she had noticed online, something she hadn't brought up earlier because she wasn't sure how serious it was. Rasheeda turned around slowly, waiting. Carly said that another rumor hinted someone might have been seen speaking to Tamar right before she left her section that night. Someone not connected to Mendices. Someone not connected to the hallway drama. Someone from outside their circle but close enough to overlap. Rasheeda blinked, stunned. Kirk's eyebrows shot up. A new unknown factor suddenly made everything even more confusing. And the room fell silent as they all tried to process what that meant, each of them wondering who that mysterious person could be and how they fit into the growing maze of rumors that had turned one chaotic night into a storm that was far from over. The silence that settled after. Carly's last sentence felt heavier than anything that had been said the entire night. It wasn't the kind of silence where people had run out of things to argue about. It was the kind where every person in the room suddenly realized that the puzzle they were trying to solve had way more pieces than they originally thought. Rasheeda stared at Carly, waiting for more, but Carly didn't speak right away. She looked torn, hesitant, like she was debating whether she should even bring the next part up at all. Kirk stepped closer, his voice low and steady, asking who the person was. Carly sighed, glancing at both of them, then finally said she had a name, but she wasn't sure how reliable it was. Rasheeda braced herself, gripping the back of the chair like she needed something solid to hold on to. Carly explained that the rumor mentioned a man who had been linked to Tamar years ago. Someone who had recently returned to Atlanta's social scene, according to the message threads circulating online. This man was seen talking to Tamar near the exit moments before things took a turn. But the reason it mattered now was because some fans claimed that the same person had been trying to avoid cameras all night, slipping in and out of the venue like he didn't want anyone confirming he was there. Kirk furrowed his eyebrows, confused. He said he didn't recognize the name when Carly whispered it to him. Rasheeda didn't recognize it either. But Carly said the point wasn't that they knew him personally. The point was that people were claiming he had been seen wearing a jacket similar to Kirk's earlier that evening. Suddenly, everything clicked. The similar colors, the similar silhouette, the confusion about the hallway clip, the misidentification. It wasn't Kirk people had glimpsed. It was someone else entirely. Rasheeda. Single quotes eyes widened as she processed it. She whispered that maybe this was why the rumors got tangled in the first place. Maybe people jumped the gun when they thought they recognized Kirk's style. Maybe this stranger was the one slipping through hallways, the one sparking arguments, the one being seen in the wrong places at the wrong times. Kirk nodded slowly, not relieved yet, but finally seeing a path that made logical sense. Carly continued, explaining that the influencer she mentioned earlier had been posting cryptic messages too, hinting that they knew who was really in the hallway but weren't revealing anything because they liked the chaos. That only stirred the pot further, because the more people refused to say names, the more the internet tried to fill in the blanks themselves. And since Kirk had a history the public never forgot, his name was the easiest one to throw into the fire. Rasheeda sat down again, her fingers pressed to her temples, trying to keep her thoughts from spinning out. She said she hated that she had even doubted Kirk, even for a moment. She hated that the past still had the power to shake her like that. Kirk walked over, kneeling in front of her, holding her hands gently. He told her he understood why she reacted, that he wasn't angry, that he knew how deep those scars ran. And he blamed himself for making her feel vulnerable enough to question him again. She blinked back tears, frustrated by her own emotions, frustrated by the situation, frustrated by the way their peace had been interrupted by something they had nothing to do with. Carly cleared her throat softly, trying not to intrude on their moment, but she had more to add. She said that according to some of the messages she was reading, a blogger online claimed to have audio from someone who overheard Tamar arguing with that mystery man before she walked away. The audio wasn't confirmed, and it might just be someone chasing clout. But the timing lined up with everything else swirling online. Rasheeda sighed, asking why people loved chaos so much. Kirk muttered that for some folks, Drama was the only currency they had. Rasheed. I looked up at Carly and asked what people online were saying. Now that the blurry hallway clip was being compared to Kirk's real height, Carly said fans were split. Some had already moved on to the new theory, latching onto the idea of the mystery man. Others were still pushing Kirk's name simply because they liked the narrative. But the majority seemed to agree that the man in the hallway didn't match Kirk's build. That alone made Rasheeda feel like a weight. Kirk stood and walked to the other side of the room, pacing slowly, thinking out loud. He said that maybe they needed to get ahead of the story before it got worse. Rasheeda shook her head quickly, saying they shouldn't feed into it. She said responding publicly would only make them look guilty. And she wasn't about to let people twist her marriage into a circus again. Kirk agreed reluctantly, but said he wanted to protect her from the rumors. She told him the only protection she needed was transparency and honesty between them, not a public statement. Carly watched them, her expression softening. She said she came because she didn't want Rasheeda blindsided, and because she knew how quickly people turned ugly when they had even the slightest opportunity. Rasheeda thanked her, genuinely, even though her body still held tension. She said she appreciated the heads up, even if it meant her night had turned into a storm of emotions she thought she'd left behind. Years ago, they talked for a while longer, trying to piece together what made sense and what didn't. As the conversation went on, Kirk explained his entire timeline again, this time more detailed, more grounded, answering every question Rasheeda had without flinching. Every moment he clarified seemed to settle something inside her. She listened to him with careful attention, absorbing his words, letting them rebuild the trust she felt slipping earlier. Carly received another message while they were talking. She checked it quietly, and her eyebrows lifted again. She said someone else at the venue had posted that the mystery man had been escorted out by security shortly before Tamar's situation came to light. Fans were now debating whether that meant he was connected to what happened, or whether he had caused a disturbance unrelated to Tamar entirely. The uncertainty kept feeding the rumor cycle. But the good news was that Kirk's name wasn't being pushed as aggressively anymore. Rasheeda exhaled, her shoulders dropping as some of the tension finally left her body. She looked at Kirk, her voice soft, saying she needed him to promise something. He nodded, asking what she needed. She said she wanted him to be more mindful about where he went, who he talked to, what events he showed up at, especially when she wasn't with him. She said she wasn't trying to control him, but she needed to feel safe. And she needed to know he wasn't putting himself in positions where people could use him as a scapegoat. Kirk agreed immediately. He said he didn't want their relationship to be shaken again. Not by rumors, not by assumptions, not by other people's decisions. He said he wanted to protect what they had rebuilt, and he promised he would be more careful. The sincerity in his tone softened something inside Rasheeda that had been rigid all night. Carly stood up, smoothing her clothes, saying she would keep an eye on the blogs and let them know if anything else surfaced. She gave Rasheeda a small hug, then glanced at Kirk and nodded before heading toward the door. When she stepped outside, the house felt quiet again. But this time, it was a calmer quiet, the kind that comes after a storm has lost its rage. Rasheeda and Kirk stood facing each other in the middle of the living room. The tension had shifted, transformed into something more vulnerable. She told him she wasn't proud of how quickly she had spiraled earlier, but she needed him to understand that the fear of being blindsided wasn't something she could turn off. He told her he understood, that he took responsibility for the parts of their history that made her react that way, and that he was willing to spend every day rebuilding her trust if he had to. She stepped closer, resting her head briefly on his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her gently. They stood like that for a few moments, letting the quiet settle between them in a way that felt healing rather than heavy. Rasheeda whispered that she didn't want rumors to be the thing that defined their marriage anymore. Kirk promised they wouldn't be, not if he could help it. As the night went on, the noise from the online world kept buzzing, shifting, evolving, but inside the Frost house, things finally started to feel steady again. The storm hadn't fully passed, but its sharpest winds had calmed. leaving them with a renewed sense of understanding, a deeper connection, and a promise to face whatever came next as a united front. Even if the outside world continued to spin in every direction around them, and with all of that swirling through the night, the questions hanging over this city didn't fade as the sun started to come up. If anything, the conversations only grew louder. Because even with all the pieces put together, even with the hallway clip making more sense, even with the mystery man becoming the new focus of the online debate, folks were still left wondering how one chaotic night managed to pull so many people into its shadow. Fans kept replaying the rumors, trying to separate the noise from the truth, trying to understand whether this was just another example of Atlanta's gossip machine going wild, or if there really were threads connecting people behind the scenes that nobody had fully uncovered yet. But one thing became clear as the dust settled a little. No matter how big the rumors grew, no matter how tangled the stories got, no matter how many unexpected names got dragged into the middle of it, the Frost family ended the night stronger than they had begun it. And that alone became its own kind of story. A quiet reminder that not every rumor deserves to take root. Not every headline deserves to define someone's life. And not every storm ends by tearing things apart. Sometimes it ends by pushing people closer in ways they didn't see coming. But now, the rest is in your hands. If you've been watching this situation unfold like everyone else, if you've been scrolling through the twists, listening to the whispers, trying to figure out where the truth ends and where the exaggeration begins, then I want to hear from you. What do you think really happened that night? Do you think Kirk was unfairly dragged into the chaos? Or do you believe someone intentionally used his name to shield their own involvement? Do you think the mystery man theories hold any weight? Or do you think this is just another Atlanta rumor storm that's spiraled out of control? Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell me how you see it. Let me know whether you think the Frost family handled this the right way, or if you believe more of the story is still hiding in the shadows. And if you enjoyed diving into this drama with me, make sure you hit that like button so the video gets pushed out to more people who follow these jaw-dropping moments. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more breakdowns, more behind-the-scenes commentary, and more wild scandals that keep Atlanta on fire. Tap the bell so you never miss an update. Because in a city where things shift overnight and new plot twists drop without warning, you're definitely going to want to stay ahead of the next wave.